Hi class, we are going to learn how to make a starter because a lot of you said that you do not have access to yeast, and that is perfectly okay because yeast is everywhere. So all you need for this is, we're gonna have at least a cup of water in case our flour needs more, a cup of flour, bowl, spoon, and something that you're gonna store it in. So here we go, cup of flour. Water, we're gonna start with half a cup. So I have a cup and we're gonna eyeball it. That's about half a cup. Stir it, and it's gotta make like a slurry. So as you're mixing around, if it's too thick, then you're just gonna add a little more water to it. So right here, we're already too thick. So in goes more water. And who knows, we may end up using the whole thing. If it's a nice day, you might want to just leave it open and uncovered for a bit, but there should be yeast in the flour. Mix that around, add a little more water. So there we go, 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water. And that is because in Colorado, you know, it's a very dry climate. There's not a lot of water in the flour. You just got to get this mixed around. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can be lumpy. That's it. That's all you need. Now, let this sit for 24 hours. And then the next one we're going to talk about is how to feed your starter. It is day 2, time to feed your starter. I've got my wonderful little assistant Lucy here. You gonna help out? It's also college sweatshirt day and hat day, so I made sure to put $1 in the bag. All right, here we go. Your starter. You're gonna be able to see what yours looks like. You're gonna take the lid off, and in one day, it should have a little bit of liquid on top. If you see little bubbles in there, that's awesome. That's a good idea. That means it's working. So, to feed your starter, half of it gets thrown away, and then we're gonna replace it with half a cup of water and half a cup of flour. You need to do this every day if you're gonna keep your starter out on the counter. If you're gonna put your starter in a refrigerator, you only need to feed it once a week. So, if you have a scale, I would weigh out how much starter you have here, cut it in half, take half of it, throw it away. We are gonna actually save our half of our starter today and try to make a pizza dough out of it so it doesn't go to waste. If you don't have a scale, what I would do is stir your starter and then use a measuring cup to see how much of a starter you got. So scrape all those little bits in there. Now, what we're trying to do is build healthy bacteria in our starter and yeast. And so if it doesn't smell funky, you're doing well. I will put a link to a thing for things for you to read about on starters to see if yours is doing well. What you want to look for is to make sure there's no little orange on it and that it doesn't smell moldy or funky. That's a bad thing. So I've got basically 10 ounces. So 5 of these ounces are gonna go for my pizza dough. And then, we're almost there. And it doesn't have to be exact, ladies and gentlemen. This is 1,000 years old technology. Back into the bowl. And now to feed it, you're gonna use half a cup of, I'm using bread flour this time, but any flour you have is fine. It doesn't really matter. You can even use rye flour. And they say rye flour is really good because just has more nutrients in it. There's more nutrients in rye flour than there is in bread or all-purpose flour. So there's our half cup of flour, half a cup of water. Give it a stir. And then again, if you're gonna leave this out on the counter, just let it sit. But if you wanna only feed your starter once a week, she's done. If you only want to feed it once a week, you put it in the fridge. Now, the goal is to be able to make sourdough bread with this in 2 more days. So we got 2 more feedings to go. Tomorrow, you're going to do the exact same thing. Half of it in the trash. Feed it with a half cup water and a half cup flour. Put your lid back on it. And again, we're going to leave it on the counter. We'll see you tomorrow. See ya. Hi class, we are gonna make our sourdough bread today. Finally, your starter should be on day 4. It should be bubbly like this. It should look and have little air bubbles on the top. That means it's ready. It's all set to make bread. So give that a stir. And so we're gonna take out some of that today for our bread. And then we're gonna feed it after we're done. So here is my recipe that I've used for, I don't know, 2 years. We're doing a half batch today, which means 400 grams of flour, 230 grams or milliliters of water, which could be grams if you want to measure it, 10 grams of salt. I'm using kosher salt, actually 5 grams. We're using half the recipe, 5 grams, and 320 grams of our starter. So those of you guys that don't have a scale, I'm going to be measuring these things so you can understand how to do it without a scale. So start. 400 grams of flour is basically 2 1/3 cup. So I got my scale on. There's 160. And I'm using full-on bread flour. If you don't have bread flour, don't worry about it. You can use just regular flour. Should still come out all right. Okay, there's our 2 cups. Here comes our 1/3 of a cup. And boom. We're just a little shy, so we're gonna put in, that was a 1/3. Here's half of a 1/3. Probably should have used half a cup. 2 1/2 cups, go with that. 405 grams, there we are, good enough. Now to that, I'm gonna tear out my scale. Those of you guys that don't have a scale, how much? We're gonna use 160 grams of starter, and I'll tell you how much that is here in a second. It's probably gonna be about half of your starter. And again, like I said, you're gonna feed this after you're done today. So there is my 160 grams, nearly perfect. Those of you guys at home, that is 150 milliliters, or if you wanna go the cup route, that is 2/3 of a cup. There we go, 2/3 of a cup of starter. So that goes into here. Make sure you get that all in there. And like I said, now you're gonna feed your starter if you wanna keep using it. If you're not gonna ever do this again, then yeah, you're just gonna waste it and throw it away. But I'm gonna use my starter again to make like pizza, so we're just gonna put some flour in there, and then I will put a little bit of water in there, consider it fed. All right. Now we need 5 grams of salt. 5 grams of salt is basically a teaspoon. So here's our teaspoon of salt. And then you need 230 milliliters of water, 230 milliliters. You can weigh that out with your scale to 230 grams. So 230, I am using the KitchenAid today, and that's just because it's Mother's Day and we gotta get going and make this quick. 230. We're almost there, almost there. There we go, 230. On to the mixer. Now, for those of you guys that are home, if you're gonna use stand mixer, use your hand first to mix it around. That way it won't send the flour all over the place. Get it going into a nice ball. And then you're gonna mix this using the KitchenAid mixer for about 5 to 8 minutes. So we'll see you back in 5 or 8 minutes. All right, class, it's been about 5 minutes and our dough is formed into a nice ball. So we're gonna take this off the hook. I'm just gonna store it in the same bowl overnight. So I'm gonna spray with a little bit of oil and then just take this ball off, let it sit. It's gotta sit overnight because we're making sourdough, so the bread needs to ferment in order to get that sourdough flavor. Cover it with plastic wrap, which is always the best thing. Don't just put a tea towel on top because it tends to get too dry. So wrap it up into the fridge for 24 hours. Then tomorrow we're gonna take this out. We're gonna let it sit out for 4 hours and rise up again. And then we'll punch it down, and then we're gonna form it into a ball again, put it in a banneton, let it rise up again for another hour, and then bake it. That's it. See you tomorrow. Hi class, all right, it's been a day since we made our bread. It's been sitting in the fridge, which means it's cold as ice. So we need to let this warm up. So we're gonna let it warm up, and what I usually do, if it was a warm day, I just set it on the counter. It's kind of cold today. So what I do is I turn the oven light on, and then I just put this in there with the oven light on. The oven light will produce enough heat to create like a warm atmosphere that'll be around 70, 80 degrees. And we'll come back and check on this over the next 3 to 4 hours. See you in a bit. All right, class, it is time for the bread to come out of the oven, so let's see how we are. It smells fantastic, it's hot. Don't worry about the extra flour that's on the top of your bread if you have that, because as the bread dries, you can just brush that off. But there you go, 1 loaf of sourdough bread from scratch, and it smells fantastic. All right, have fun.